This episode of Landmine Radio is sponsored by Dittman Research. Do you know what the most valuable thing in the world is? High-quality information. Because high-quality information informs much better decision-making. Dittman Research has been providing high-quality information to Alaska's leading businesses, organizations, and campaigns for 50 years. Do you really know what Alaskans think about your company or your issue? How about your clients, your shareholders, or your employees? So stop fumbling around in the dark. Hire Dittman Research and find out what's really going on. DittmanResearch.com. Okay, back here with Becky Wint Pearson from GCI, former municipal attorney. How you doing?
Doing well. Thanks, Jeff.
We had a little bit of a rough start there. Luckily, I noticed the issue very quickly.
It's okay. He resolved it quickly.
I told you I recorded a podcast once with Bill Evans maybe a year ago. It was like the greatest fucking podcast ever. It was like an epic podcast.
Yeah.
And there was an audio issue with the file, and it got corrupted. So I had to call Bill and say, come back for a...
Oh, we came back. That's good.
We did another one. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
So I'm happy to have you here. We've been trying to do this for a while. I was in Juneau, but you're with GCI now, but you were the former municipal attorney.
It was, yeah.
For a while. And I just realized you told me you left in February 2020.
I did, yeah.
So was that lucky, or
timing.
did you see something coming?
I would like to say that I accurately predicted the mayhem that would befall the municipality in the winter of 2020, but I did not at all. It was completely, and actually, ironically, when Ona Browse and I, and the mayor's chief of staff and I announced our departures the same day.
Oh yeah, that came at the same time, right?
And we were talking about, and we were like, it's in the last 18 months, the administration, we had advice from staffers at the muni that said, in the last 9 months, you can barely get anything done anyway, as everyone sees you on the way out. So we thought, it's going to be super uneventful, right? We lived through the earthquake, the first declaration of a state of emergency that the municipality had ever done. We'd, gone through some tough budget, seasons, and had sold Municipal Light and Power, which was the biggest transaction in the municipality's history. We thought, how
it was like $1 billion.
Yeah,
right?
It's going to be really calm from here on out, and clearly was not the case. So it ended up being kind of a serendipitous time to have departed.
A lot of times, like the mayor and the second term or the governor, they try to go for the legacy at the end. So they focus more on let's kind of lock in what we did. Or you missed two pretty big ones.
I did.
The COVID and the Athens.
Yes, I did miss two significant events.
Those were maybe bigger than the earthquake or the
they
MLMP.
Were, right? I mean, but that's wild, right? I mean, we had literally never declared a state of emergency as a municipality prior to the earthquake. And then, to go straight from that to this ongoing COVID-related disaster emergency and a mayoral resignation, that was certainly not anticipated at the time we left.
So I want to go into that later, but you're back at GCI. You were at GCI before.
I was. I came to the municipality from GCI. I'd been at GCI for a few years. I was in private practice for a number of years, and then I went to GCI and did not in any way intend to leave GCI. I just had the opportunity present itself to go join the Berkmans administration, and made the choice to follow that opportunity, and then had the lucky opportunity to come back to GCI in my new role as general counsel this past year ago, a little more than a year ago.
So back in way further up, you're not from Alaska, you said New York, right?
I'm not, yeah, I'm from rural northern New York, the part of New York that I think very few people even think about as part of New York. I'm from up by the Canadian border, north of the Adirondack Park, a town of about 5,000 people, called Canton, which has winters that are similar to Fairbanks, and summers that are kind of similar to Fairbanks too. Warmer summers, very cold winters.
A lot of history in that part of New York.
Yeah, a lot of history.
I read Team of Rivals.
Oh.
And they talk a lot about Seward, obviously, in New York, and they talk a lot about kind of how he was in New York, and he was almost supposed to be president, Lincoln got him. Very tricky. So where did you go to law school?
I went to law school at Yale in Connecticut.
That's a big one. I think I knew that. That's a big one.
It's actually a small one.
It's a good one.
The big contrast between Yale and Harvard is that Yale has very small graduating classes compared to Harvard Law School. So it's a very different experience. It's a small law school, has a unique grading structure, so it's relatively non-competitive, a small community. So
I know several folks did you have any classmates now that are in Alaska that went to Yale, or
Well, ironically, right, if you look at the municipal government for a time there,
didn't Falsey?
Yeah, Bill Falsey was municipal manager, and Forrest Dunbar for a time was chair of the assembly, and I was municipal attorney, and we are all Yale Law alums. And Kate Vogel, who replaced me,
Was there any overlap when you guys were there, or was it different times?
Bill, I think, graduated. Bill and I are the same age, but he went straight to law school from college, and I took a number of years off. So I think I sort of started at Yale right after he left. Forrest and I think, overlapped by a year. I think he started right before I left. And Kate and I were there at the same time.
So how'd you get to Alaska? Have you have any connections here? Did you have any reason to come here, or was it a job?
It was sort of a combination. It was kind of, I feel like, the classic lawyer story, right? Like I was about 30 when I finished law school, and I was supposed to go back to a job in Manhattan at a law firm in New York that I actually had enjoyed working for. But I kind of felt like I was ready to not, I didn't really want to be 30 and living in a shoebox apartment in Queens and working crazy hours. And I came to Alaska to visit at the end of my 2L summer. I was supposed to go on a longer vacation with my college roommate. She had to go to a family wedding, and I came up here on a Habitat for Humanity trip and built houses in Mountain View and just really liked Anchorage. It feels a lot like where I'm from, except it has bigger mountains and bigger mountains and better jobs. Really, is the reality, right? Upstate New York it does not have the economic opportunity that Anchorage does, and particularly did at that point. And so I applied for a clerkship on the state Supreme Court. They recruit across the country. They come to Yale, and so a lot
of folks have come up here doing that.
Yeah,
lawyers.
That's the classic lawyer story. You come here for a year and clerk, and then you realize that you never want to live anywhere else, and then you end up staying.
Who'd you clerk for?
I clerked for Morgan Kristen during the few years that she was on the state Supreme Court before she moved to the Ninth Circuit.
So what did you do from undergraduate to law school? You took 4 or 5 years off, right?
I did. I did a variety of things. I first worked as a travel writer. I wrote copy about southern Germany for Let's Go. I covered Bavaria and Munich. So Munich and the whole state of Bavaria. I wrote copy about the Bavarian Alps and national parks down there. After that, I taught at a tuition-free private school for low-income girls in Dorchester, which is a part of Boston. From there,
isn't that like one of the hardcore parts, like all the crime and the Southie Dorchester? Isn't it?
Yeah,
my friend Carolyn's from Boston. I always ask her about it. Carolyn Hall. You probably know Carolyn.
Yeah, I do. And Dorchester is a large neighborhood. It has a number of different pocket neighborhoods and various different populations that live there. The part of Dorchester that I taught in was very diverse. We had a tremendously diverse student body, all low-income students. And it was a really unique environment. It's actually run by the School Sisters of Notre Dame, which is an order of nuns whose entire focus is on creating educational opportunities for women.
Indiana, Notre Dame, right?
No, I don't know exactly where their international headquarters is, but they're all over the world. So the nuns I worked for, they had taught in Africa and in South America and all these different places, and then they were now running the school for girls in Dorchester. So I worked there, and then I got a summer job working for a long shot presidential candidate named Howard Dean.
No way.
Yes.
I haven't heard that name in a while.
Yeah, exactly. So I sold everything I owned, got in my Dodge Neon, drove it to New Hampshire, where I was going to work for Howard Dean for a few months. He was going to make some points about, getting us out of the war in Iraq.
Was that 2004?
That was, I moved there in the summer of 2003. This was in
preparation
the 2004
election,
for the primary.
Right?
Yeah, it was the 2004 election.
Because he was he was governor.
He was governor of Vermont.
And didn't he say something that really something happened where it really caught on? Because I remember I moved here in 2004. I was kind of younger, but.
Well, he gave us, if I remember correctly, he gave a speech, I think it was at the DNC and he talked about, he kind of openly expressed his opposition to the war in Iraq, and he was more out on a limb about healthcare than any of the candidates at the time. So those are the things that attracted to me. It was those two positions that he'd taken. I really felt like he had some good things to say about healthcare. I was in a place where I was teaching, and just really, it was very clear to me, the students that I taught, the huge impact that a lack of access to healthcare was having in their lives. An inability to get glasses, an inability to get basic care for things that really impeded their ability to learn. So I, thought I'll go work for this guy for a few months, and he'll make some interesting points, and then he'll probably not go any further, and I'll go back to teaching. And instead, by the end of the summer, he was way ahead in the polls, and we had a much more legitimate campaign operation in New Hampshire. So I stayed there with the Dean campaign through the end of the New Hampshire primary. Just before the New Hampshire primary, you may remember, he screamed wildly in Iowa, and that had a very...
Maybe that, yeah, I know he did something that was like, because that was the one where Kerry ended up being the nominee, right?
Yeah,
John Kerry.
he did, yep.
But I feel like Howard Dean, this is a long time ago, I was only 19 in 2004, but when I moved here, but I remember there was like he had like a Ron Paul type thing. And like 2008, he caught on for a while, and it was like a big thing.
He was way ahead through most of the fall. He was ahead by August, and he was way ahead through most of the fall. His lead had started to crumble in a variety of different kind of ways before we got to the primary season. My impression of the Iowa operation is that they didn't have a great organized field operation to get people to the caucuses. I don't know. I wasn't on the ground there, and then he had this wild screaming moment, which was...
That's right. He was like, ah!
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
that big, I remember that that's what that was.
Which a lot of people I knew were in the room, right? And said that was really a product of how he was mic'd on TV, right? Like in the room, you couldn't hear it at all, but it sounded crazy on TV.
Who else was it? It was Kerry, him...
Wes Clark was like, they thought he was going to get a lot of traction for a while. There was a whole ton.
Was Dennis Kucinich?
Yeah.
I think involved. He was in 2008 too. He was around.
Yep. He's had a couple of different runs. So
I
anyway.
didn't know you worked on the Howard Dean. Do you like know him? Could you call him right now? Or
no, I couldn't call him right now. I was not buddies with him. I worked in New Hampshire field. I did drive him around a bit and get some time to talk with him, but we were definitely not buddies. I would not say that I could give him a call.
So you did all this stuff, and then you decided...
Well, there's more. This is not where it ends. So he screams in Iowa. I end up getting, they stopped paying us, basically, at the moment that he screamed in Iowa. So a direct impact on my life. And then after the primary,
So
I decided to stay in New Hampshire. I worked for a peace-based community for abused and neglected boys, which my brother affectionately refers to as the Forced Vegetarian Farm, for a while.
Where's that
at? It's in Rumney, New Hampshire.
So you had the girls' school, but then you went to the boys.
Yes, I was doing the tour of educational institutions for youth. And then after that, I worked for a couple years at Dartmouth College with undergraduates on community service projects, and then decided I needed to kind of have a longer term life direction, and I went to law school.
It's kind of the gambit in your off year. So I know a lot of lawyers who did that, and other ones who went straight through. It seems like the ones who waited 3 or 4 or 5 years, they always say they really happy they did that.
Yeah, I was really happy. I mean, it helped me figure out what I cared about in a career in a sense that I didn't have a sense of when I was a student. I think when I was a student, I thought a lot about like, what's the, what is the ideal you're working for in a job? I didn't think a lot about like, what do I really want to do day in and day out? How much do I want to have to think? How much do I want to have to interact with people? Do I like working with teams? Do I like arguing? What do I want to know about? And I think that helped me pick. I would not have gone to law school directly out of school. Clearly, I didn't make that choice. And I ended up really liking law school and really liking being a lawyer. And I think that having been out for a few years helped me make that choice in a more informed way.
So I assume when you were clerking, is that when you met your husband? No?
Well, actually, initially, yes. I met my husband initially actually at Bill Falsey's house. It was the house that Bill Falsey was no longer living in. He had moved back east and left his house in Rogers Park as a rental for some other young lawyers, and there was like a young lawyers party, and I met my husband there for the first time, and I made what I thought was a really funny joke, and he did not think it was funny, and I was like,
gosh,
well,
what was it, like a mom joke?
I don't even remember. I was like, oh, this guy and I are clearly never going to be friends because he just doesn't think that I'm hilarious, which I clearly am. And so we met in passing there, and then we ended up playing on the same young lawyers softball team. And at the time I had another boyfriend, and he invited me to be on, actually I invited him first to be on my, Fireweed road relay team, the bike road relay race. And then we had
the 400 thing? Or
we were doing the 200 mile, not the 400 mile.
That's crazy. Wow.
And then you don't do the whole 200 miles. You do it in chunks. So we do about 50 apiece. So I invited him to do that. And then we had to cancel that for some reason. I think my dad ended up visiting or something. So I couldn't do that. So then he in return invited me to be on his Klondike road relay team. And then we did that together, and then sort of progressively, became better friends and started dating. And
so at that point, were you planning on staying up here, or?
I had actually already gotten a job at the end of my clerkship year. I got a job with Ashburn & Mason, local firm. And so already was planning to do that and had transitioned to that role by the time he and I actually started dating.
My friend Lee Baxter, he's a big fan of Bill Pearson.
Yeah, Bill Pearson is a big fan of Lee
He
Baxter.
said he's like one of those lawyers he loves that cares more about fishing and going out on the weekends than
I think that's true.
the law. You know, the law.
think
Some of those
that's very
people,
true.
all they do is work. 20 hours a day. And
Bill has a good balance. He cares a lot about.
I met him at the mayor's ball a couple
Yeah.
years ago. He was. We're doing the little photo booth thing. That was fun.
Yeah.
So you met how long ago? That was like 10. Trying to remember
Oh gosh.
the math here.
We've been married. Well, let's see. We've been together 10 years. We got married in 2013, but we started dating in 2011.
Did you ever think or plan on marrying a lawyer? Like, was that part of the, because a lot of times lawyers do, because they're with lawyers, a lot of lawyers do marry lawyers.
Yeah, no, I definitely did not think that I was going to marry a lawyer. And I think honestly, like I mean, I'm biased because I am an Alaska lawyer, but I feel like the lawyers in Alaska are a lot more fun than lawyers. Like if I had gone to practice in New York City and someone had said, like, do you want to go to a young lawyer's shindig? I probably would have like backed out of the room slowly. And here, actually, I mean, I think I have a great group of friends who are lawyers. We have the young lawyers organization here was always great and fun when I was, an age where I was doing those things. And so I did not intend to marry a lawyer for sure.
A little more loose up here.
Yeah, a little more fun.
So that's the thing is like, a lot of these people go to law school, and I like to go into law school. I graduated in 2009. I took the LSAT, didn't study, did horrible, thank God, because, people borrow all this money for some of these schools, and on the East Coast, they get a job, which they have to pay the loans back, and they end up working like, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, and you're in a big city, so maybe it's not as enjoyable if you're in Alaska, and there's a lot more to do.
Yeah. Oh, no, certainly. I think people have a much better quality of life here. And I mean, why would you live here if you were going to work 100 hours a week, right? I mean, it's like you live somewhere like New York where you can get your clothes dry cleaned at 2 a.m, right? And where there isn't anything.
I've moved here when I was 19 and 04, and I grew up in New Mexico,
Oh, okay.
Albuquerque.
Oh,
Which, I know people that have lived in like New York, Chicago, and it's like fun in a lot of ways, but during the COVID, actually, it's pretty fascinating how many people, college students and just younger people, came back to Alaska
yeah.
because it was so much better being here than being stuck in like an apartment in New York or Chicago or Seattle.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of people came back here.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, I mean, I've been continuously grateful for how nice it's been to be here during this. I have a lot of friends in the Northeast, and the challenges of trying to, I mean, we can, at least can always get outside. We have good, outdoor green space that's not too crowded, and it's just been.
Remember last summer, things were pretty normal.
Yeah.
Where you're watching, and these cities are shut down and nobody can go anywhere.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to imagine that.
Yeah. No, I'm grateful to have been here and not in the Northeast anymore during this.
So how did you were Ashburn and Mason, and at some point in GCI? How'd that
Yeah,
work out?
I was at Ashburn and Mason for about 5 years. I became a shareholder there. It's a wonderful firm, a fun group of people, and really interesting practice. I did mostly kind of land and local government law things.
We'll talk about a little bit later. We'll talk about the Campbell Lake.
Yeah, we can talk about
That's a good one.
land law particularly. And I actually sort of laid the groundwork for that when I was at Ashburn and Mason. I don't know if you and I ever talked about this, that I was involved in work on the Sturgeon case when I was
I
at
didn't know
Ashburn
that.
and Mason. Yeah, because Ashburn represented John Sturgeon.
Right. I didn't know you were involved in
It was
that.
very beginning, right? I mean, that case went on for years and years and years. So that's part of the reason Campbell Lake landed in my lap, because I actually had some kind of context for the law of navigable waters in Alaska. That was the beginning of that knowledge. But yeah, so I left Ashburn and Mason. Actually, honestly, when I had my oldest child, the billable hour is definitely challenging when you have anything that constricts the number of hours that you can spend working, right? Because the idea of billing by the hour, right? You're rewarded for the number of hours you work, not necessarily how effective you are in those hours. And so when I had my first son, I started thinking about, should I maybe make a transition in-house or something? And I had actually a friend from college who was an in-house attorney at GCI, and they were looking for someone with some land use knowledge, and just kind of was like a serendipitous.
Which they have a ton of need for. With
Yes.
all their, lines going everywhere and cables and.
Oh, yeah. And antenna structures we build all over the state in all kinds of interesting and layered land ownership situations. So
I remember the first time I was president of my community council years ago, Taco Campbell, but I was also the president of the Federation for Community Councils.
yeah.
And that was the first time, it was like 13 or 14, when one of those tower things came up.
Oh, God,
and it was,
yeah. No one likes towers.
I don't know if it was AT&T or GCI, but it was my first time coming up with, they were going to put one up somewhere. And it actually was interesting. It looked like a tree.
Yeah.
It pretty much blended in. All these people came up. They were fucking furious. They were like yelling.
Oh, yeah.
And this was my first time being like, wow, I guess these towers do have some controversy depending on where they go
Oh, yeah.
in some neighborhood. People were like really mad. They were talking about radio, frequencies and their brains and then the aesthetics. And did you deal with that a lot? That
Yeah,
seems
so
like that was
that's
a big...
exactly what I dealt with. That's what
Oh
I
my
was like hired to
God.
do, is to deal with. There are, federal and just sort of a federal overlay to local land use permitting for antenna structures, in part because there's always these objections, right? So there's a federal framework that kind of is an overlay over the local, restrictions and guidelines around tower siting. And so a big piece of what I did when I first came to GCI was to work on, crafting and supporting our applications to be able to build tower structures around the state. And it's challenging, right? I mean, it's a land use that's hard to cite. Everyone who's a neighbor of it is always has some reservations, and so it's always the challenge is trying to find that least intrusive alternative that meets the coverage and try to make those whatever changes, including camouflage.
The ones that look like trees, actually, if you don't really look very closely, you don't notice them.
Oh, I think the one at Kincaid, it's the one at Kincaid. That was something I worked on when I was.
Right. Yes, I know that one.
Yeah, that one is. I think that one it blends in really well. It has a light on top of it because it's it's in a flight path for the airport. But it otherwise I think looks pretty natural.
I got to ask, did remember the COVID, the whole 5G?
Yeah.
Did that come up at GC? Did anybody bring that up, or was that a
Well, you know what?
thing?
A friend of my husband's at one point said that, very seriously, he was like, that COVID vaccine is the government like putting a chip in you, and then
I've had people tell me the same
they're
thing.
going to activate it with the 5G. And I was like, well, I didn't want to tell you, but that is what I've been working on. So.
I have a friend, not an acquaintance, and they didn't get vaccinated. And I just said, why not? And I understand like the hesitation if it's new and it's just technology, and I'm kind of like understanding to that. But they said, I really think there's some kind of tracking, and I thought they were joking.
Yeah.
They were not joking.
Yeah.
That's so crazy. I mean, the technology part, the health. Okay, it's new a little bit, whatever.
Well, the irony, right, is that your phone actually is tracking
Correct.
you every day, and you're like everyone who I think has these concerns. I don't have any statistics to support this, but I would assume that the vast majority of them do have a cell phone.
Have you seen that you can turn it off on your phone, but the factory, I think the default is it tracks where you're going.
Yeah.
And I saw an article years ago, and I turned it off. But if you go into it, it like shows like where you go for like the past like months, right? Your office, your house. So it basically tracks your patterns.
Yeah.
And Edward Snowden talked about this, that if they know your patterns, right, if the government has access or somebody has access to that, it'd be very easy to like set you up or, frame you for something. And just imagine if everybody knows where you're going at any time, where you're going to be. It's kind of scary. So I turn that off where it doesn't track my movements. And like it would show you go to this address for 6 hours a day. This is where you go for 8 hours or 10 hours. It's scary stuff. That's the tracking.
Yeah, no, seriously. So, I mean, in terms of the things if you are concerned about tracking, I think it's a probably more supportable concern to be concerned about, whether your phone knows where you are than whether the vaccination includes a microchip.
So there wasn't any big, because I mean, some of these in England, weren't they destroying towers about the 5G and the COVID? Remember that was a thing for a while?
I mean, it's certainly been on our radar, because it was a concern that was particularly heightened in certain areas of the world. So it's certainly been something that we were attentive to and acknowledged as a potential issue during COVID.
So you're at GCI, you're married, things are going well.
Yeah.
Who asked you to be the municipal attorney? How'd that come up?
So in the fall of 2017, Bill Falsey was promoted.
So we overlapped at GCI.
When did you leave GCI?
I was there in 2015. They bought the company I was working. Network Business Systems, NBS?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
So they bought us. I don't know if you were involved in that at all.
I wasn't doing any M&A stuff at that point.
They bought us in 2015, and then I stayed. I got moved to the commercial sales department.
Oh, okay.
And end of 2015, and then I ended up leaving I was like let go like a year later. They were doing some reorg, but so I was there till the end of 2016.
Oh, got it. Yeah, we did overlap. So I went to GCI, moved to GCI in the spring of 2015, and
so I was August.
yeah.
I never saw you at the company meeting. I used to always go to the company meetings at the tower
Oh, yeah.
because I liked that one better.
Well, there's like 12 different sessions of the company meeting, so maybe you and I went to different.
yeah, because there's like different locations too.
Yeah, there's different
Actually,
locations.
that's a cool thing about GCI working there. You can go to those. It's quarterly, right?
They're twice a year.
And you'd go, and they would just kind of the executives would break down stuff, and I really like going to those. It was
Oh, good.
I
That's
thought that
good
was
to
a really
hear.
good
That's helpful feedback.
use of resources and time to kind of tell people
Good.
what's going on.
And so, then we've been doing them over Teams for the past year and actually have found that makes it, we've had, attendance rates that have really been exceeded anything we had before. And I think it's also put kind of our non-Anchorage based employees and our Anchorage based employees on more equal footing in those meetings. So it's good to hear that you had a positive experience.
I went to every one.
Yeah.
I think I could have sworn it was quarterly. Maybe it was twice a year, but whenever it was, I'd go to all of them.
It's twice a year now. I'll admit it may have been different in the past.
I think it might have been maybe quarterly. Yeah. So what? So someone called you, or you got?
Yeah, literally, someone called me. I was so Bill was being promoted, and I was
Phil
Falsey. Yeah, I know it's very confusing, right? I was
your husband's
Bill Pearson. One time at the city, I said something. I was having my third child, and I said something about Bill going to the midwives with me, and people were like, "Why are you taking Bill Falsey?"
Oh my God, that's a good
like,
if I was there, I'd be like tweeting, "Oh my God, scandal!"
And I was like, "Wrong Bill." So Bill Falsey was being promoted. And I remember I was in my office at GCI, and I saw his name pop up on my phone, and I thought, "Oh no! Like, did something happen? Like, why is the municipal attorney calling me? Like,
what have we done?
Build something that wasn't permanent? Like, what is happening?" And he just called and said, "I'm going to be promoted, and do you want to take my job?" And so I had some more conversations with him and some more conversations with folks at the municipality and met with the mayor, but then ended up saying yes and going over and joining.
That's the best kind of job is when you don't apply when you get offered the job.
Yeah.
Because then you're kind of in the driver's seat.
Yeah. I've been really lucky. The last two jobs I've had have both been jobs that have come to me as opposed to me having to search them out. So
you had the land issue experience, which is one issue of the municipality attorney, but I mean, there's so much going on with that. Like, what does that job entail? I mean, I can't even imagine how much it encompasses. I mean, personnel, land.
Yeah, it involves everything, everything from internal issues at the municipality as like an operator and employer of people to, policy issues at the assembly and the mayor interested in exploring to supervising the municipal prosecutor. The municipal prosecutor's office prosecutes all misdemeanor offenses within the municipality. And so it's a real mishmash. And I think that what the municipal attorney focuses on varies based on the mayor, also varies based on what they know how to do. I feel like I used to joke that what I actually did in that role was like go around to meetings and say like, good idea, bad idea, like unconstitutional idea, and then go on to the next meeting, because a lot of it is not necessarily practicing law, but just kind of helping to formulate policy and what we can and can't do as a city.
A few former, I won't say who, but a few former speakers of the House have told me that basically it's a glorified babysitting job, because you have to like manage all these people and make sure they show up and make sure things don't get crazy. And if somebody's yelling at somebody else, you got to like deal with it.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
It's a really good analogy.
Yeah.
So the municipality, I understand, has a whole bunch of attorneys, right?
I do, yeah.
And so is the municipal attorney, do you kind of oversee them or?
You do. And so there's there's technically kind of three sub-departments under the municipal attorney. There's the civil division, there's the criminal division. Again, the municipal prosecutor leads that. The municipal prosecutor is technically a deputy municipal attorney. And then there's the administrative hearing officer and the administrative hearing office that hears appeals to various different types of administrative citations. So if you have an odor citation for your marijuana business, or you have an animal control citation because your dog has been barking uncontrollably or has bitten someone, you have a right of appeal to the administrative hearing office. And so that's sort of the third prong of the municipal attorney's purview. And the municipal attorney is counsel to the mayor, but is also counsel to the assembly, even though the assembly has their own counsel. So it's kind of a dual representation as well.
The assembly has their own lawyer?
They do, yeah.
Who's that?
Dean Gates is their lawyer right now.
Oh, yeah. He's at the meetings.
Yep.
So oftentimes at the meetings, you probably knew that they're going to ask you to speak?
Sometimes I knew, and sometimes I did not know.
When you took the job, I assume you knew that
yes.
was like a role.
Yes, I did. I did know that was part of the job. Yes, I was aware that was part of the job.
So how many times did you get? Because sometimes they're like some debates happening, and it's maybe kind of contentious, and they're like, municipal attorney, what do you think?
Yes, that happens a lot.
And you're like, so you have to follow things. You can't be not paying attention, right?
Yes, you have to pay attention. You have to pay attention. It's funny. I was just thinking about this today, and I think I told you as we came in before we started that I was chatting with my successor, who's just been announced for Patrick Burke, about being municipal attorney. And And one of the things I said to him was, you got to be prepared for those questions at the assembly where you have no idea what the answer is and how to respond graciously.
Yeah. So we recording this on Tuesday here, the 8th. So Bronson had a press conference this morning, which I went to, and he announced Patrick Burke as municipal attorney.
Yep.
Ken McCoy is staying on as the police chief, and then Doug Schrage is fire chief. We used to work for the AFD a long time ago, and then he went to Fairbanks. But I was told that Patrick, does he go by Tito? Someone told me he goes by Tito, and I was like, is that a vodka reference or like a Yugoslavian dictator reference?
And I have no idea. I have heard that as well. I know we have some mutual friends who've referred to him as Tito, but I don't know the story. I have to ask, you have to get him on as a guest, and you can.
I should get him on there because if it's the reference to Tito,
if it's a Yugoslavian dictator reference, I want to hear that story.
Or if it's a Tito's vodka reference,
it's true. Probably also.
Or it could just be some other obscure
Yeah.
thing. So yeah, so he just got picked today, and I wonder if it's probably different because you went into an existing administration.
I did, yeah.
I wonder what it's like going into a brand new administration. Probably a lot different.
Oh yeah, in some ways I think it's going to be a lot harder because everyone's learning. There isn't really great preparation for being mayor, right? And I guess unless maybe you've been municipal manager in the past, right? So it's just a steep learning curve, I think, for anyone who steps into those leadership roles, and when everyone's learning at the same time. I imagine it's probably some good camaraderie in that, but also some challenge that no one is an expert yet in how either the people or the structures, right, of how things actually work at the municipality.
What was, when you were a municipal attorney, what was the biggest controversy or one of the things maybe something you didn't think you'd have to deal with?
That's
a big one.
A good question. I mean, the ongoing challenge, the biggest ongoing issue, I feel like that's perennially a cause of controversy is the question of how the municipality addresses the homelessness issue. I would say I knew that was going to be something that I would have to address. I didn't know the degree, I didn't know the law on that issue going into the role. And so having to learn all the nuances of the various different lines of constitutional cases that go into governing, how a municipality can and should treat homeless individuals living within the community was a steep learning curve, and something that I don't think I anticipated would take as much of my focus when I took the position.
So I didn't realize this until Lee wrote a thing last year about this, but there's a Ninth Circuit decision, which a lot of folks reference.
Yep, Martin v. Boise.
But really, there's this consent decree that the Sullivan administration entered into with the ACLU, I think, right?
Well, there's a couple different governing pieces of law in Anchorage, and you probably know a bunch of this. I know Lee has delved into this in depth, right? So there's Martin v. Boise, which is really an Eighth Amendment case, right? It's a case about what is and is not cruel and unusual punishment, right? So what can you criminalize? Can you criminalize the basic acts of living outdoors when you can't provide an indoor opportunity or indoor space in which to do those other things? And then there's also, I think he's referencing there's a due process case in the municipality's history. I think you're talking about when we were, municipality was sued several years ago. And that has to do with what kind of notice and opportunity the opportunity to be heard has to be granted before property is removed from a location and potentially disposed of. So it's a property rights case. And so there's all kinds of different overlapping rights that go into that we all have, right, as Americans who are subject to the Constitution, but as applied to individuals who are living, who are homeless, have been explored in various different cases, how they apply.
The Martin v. Boise case essentially says, and this is what's referenced a lot, is, if you don't have anywhere, like you said, if you don't have anywhere else to house people or put folks, you can't just kick them out or go in there immediately without some kind of notice, right?
Well, no, it's a little more refined than that. Again, it's an Eighth Amendment case, so it has to do with criminalizing the act of being homeless.
Remind me of the Eighth. Is that the?
It's a cruel and unusual punishment.
Okay, I'm reading this book right now. It's called OMG WTF Does the Constitution Actually Say? By Ben Sheehan. It's actually a really good book. It breaks down the whole Constitution, but then it puts it into actual English.
It's probably a good required reading for everyone.
But also, he argues in the beginning of the book that we don't teach civics. Only 8 states require a civics curriculum. Mostly, it's brought into history. And he's like, what did he say? He's like, there's knowing what happened, but there's also knowing what they were thinking about when it happened. But it just breaks it down, and there's also historical context and things. But
It's good. That should be like required reading. I do feel like I spend a lot of time as municipal attorney trying to explain to people, like trying to remind people of some basic constitutional principles, right? Like the government can't bulldoze your neighbor's house because you think it's unsightly, because that is unconstitutional.
it's part of our book club this month. And also, there's so many references to ships and the water in the Constitution.
Oh,
It's so funny.
I hadn't
because
thought
of,
about that.
Letters of marque and reprisal. So you used to be able to, you can still do that actually. The government can, it's called privateering. They can enlist like private people to go and basically ransack their enemy ships, and they get to take some of the stuff, and the government decides what's it. There's all these, like he keeps saying, and there are these like another ship issue or another boat issue. You know, watch
funny.
that.
That's funny.
It's a really good book. I think you'd like it. Anyway, so going back to the 8th,
Yeah.
you can't be cruel and unusual to people,
Yes.
which is good.
Yeah, and that's an important concept in, in people's thinking about the homelessness question. I think I hear a common question is, well, why don't you just like arrest all the homeless people, right? And it's like, well, first of all, many of the things that people are doing when people are irritated by their presence are not illegal, right? So you can't just arrest someone because they're unsightly and near your business or on the sidewalk. And then
If that was the case, I'd be in jail.
yeah, well, lucky for all of us, right? And then you also can, a number of the things that are offenses that are more frequently committed by individuals who are unhoused are things that are ticketable offenses, or they're very low level misdemeanors. And the Eighth Amendment does preclude. I mean, you can't incarcerate someone for a year because of public defecation or something like that. That's just it's not a constitutional approach to managing that kind of situation. So I think that's a really important amendment for the homelessness issue.
The other good part in there is the habeas corpus deal, because they used to, like back in Europe, they would just take you away.
Yeah, and you couldn't
That's
tell
why
why what body of evidence was subjecting you to that.
So if you get arrested, the Constitution requires that you get put in front of a judge, and they have to tell you what you did. And
yeah,
I love that.
it's good.
They also had the
It's a good part of our system.
what's the ex post facto stuff, and then there's another one that starts with an A, where you do something and they pass a law afterwards saying you can't do that.
Yes,
They used to
and
do
then
that.
you can't be in trouble for something that was passed after the date of your offense.
Apparently, that was big in Europe. They would just pass. A long time ago, they would say, "We don't like you. We're going to pass a law
against
makes what
you.
you did illegal."
Yeah.
So the homeless. We did a video maybe you saw it 2 years ago.
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah.
And we went out to all these camps and we talked to people. And what I found to be frustrating was a lot of the folks we talked to, the further you get away from downtown, the more well-off people are. The more kind of the ones downtown, I think, are some of the more mentally ill, and it's a little. But when you get like Campbell Creek area, you run into folks that are also probably struggling with addiction or mental illness, but they're kind of, they can like take care of themselves. And many of them were like, yeah, we like it out here. It's pretty good. It's summertime. And that's one of the, I think, frustrations some people have is these camps, people are out there and there's like bicycles and chop shops and propane tanks and tools. And I think things have gotten better with the Sullivan deal. I've talked to some folks downtown, some of the business owners we used to deal with 2 years ago in our video, and they pretty much were like, yeah, things are great.
Yeah.
Everyone's at the Sullivan and the problems got better, but that's shutting down in September. Unless they keep it open, I guess it's pretty expensive.
Yeah, and I mean I think that's the heart of the challenge, right? Is that no one should have to live, no one should have to be homeless, no one should have to live in an unhoused situation. But there are legitimate challenges and problems too, right? No one should get to run a bicycle chop shop and steal bikes and sell them for parts either. So there's a bunch of different challenges interwoven in trying to make progress and headway with the issue in a way that's humane and also effective.
And there's economic challenges too,
Yeah.
just like how much money people are making now and opportunities. I think there's hundreds probably of elements to that, and that's why it doesn't get solved very easily.
Oh yeah, I mean, if someone had a solution, that we would be
They'd
solved
be very
by
wealthy
now, right?
So I wanted to ask you about the big one here, the Campbell Lake
Yeah,
article.
yeah.
You were a municipal attorney,
I was.
and the article a few months later resulted in a joint statement from the municipality and the state. And I kept going to the meetings, if you remember. I think you were there at some of them. Because we kept getting contacted to the point where I was getting tired of it by hundreds of emails saying, what's going on? How do I use the easements? And the city hadn't done, at that point, anything. So I guess maybe tell me how you found out about that issue. And after the article came out, it was a kind of thing where people calling were calling you, or was it?
You know, I'm trying to remember how it initially came to our attention. Maybe it was DNR who reached out to us, or did you write us a letter? Someone reached out to the municipal attorney's office, and it ended up in my lap for kind of a twofold reason, right? Like when you're the municipal attorney, things that seem like they're going to be particularly controversial or particularly public, end up with the municipal attorney as opposed to a deputy. And also, as we talked about earlier, I had some previous experience in the law of navigable waterways. And so in terms of who actually had the expertise to advise on the core question of, a navigability determination and whether Campbell Lake should be considered a navigable waterway, it just, naturally kind of fell to me the confluence of those two things.
It's so fascinating, the history. It's not a natural lake. It's been dammed, and then we later found out that the city actually rebuilt the dam in like 1990.
Oh, yeah.
And they maintain it. So it's just the whole story, the history of it's interesting. But what led to that joint statement? I mean, was it?
Well, I would say, navigability is really a state level decision, right? I mean, we've talked about this a bit, that, it's a conclusive navigability decision is only achieved through litigation. And I understand now that there is or may be litigation pending about that. So
they haven't started litigation, but we got access to a large 20-page document that the homeowners association hired Holmes Whittle Barcott. I think Jim Reeve, was he the old municipal manager?
Oh yeah, he was municipal attorney under
attorney.
Yeah.
So he was he's been working on it. They haven't started litigation yet, but I think they're teeing up for it.
Yeah, and it will, put aside all of the human elements and whatever else of this, if that comes to litigation, it will be an interesting case because there are a number of interesting specific factors in this case about the navigability of that waterway that will be interesting to be adjudicated. So purely academically.
One of the easements, that's the first one we found. Actually, we didn't even write about or know about, and it makes sense now because that section line is a straight line.
Oh, the easement on the north side of the lake?
Yes, we didn't know about that one. We just wrote about the one on Senator von Imhoff and her husband's property and the neighbor.
Yeah.
That was the one that DNR or Fish and Game told us about when Paxson.
Oh, yeah, because there's actually because there was the vacation of the original portion of the section line easement was vacated.
Part of it was on the south side, and that was result of when von Imhoff and her husband bought the property. They were aware of the easement. They tried to get it vacated with DNR, and then
they vacated the section line and platted that more limited easement that is on the plat for that property. So in making the joint statement, we looked to DNR essentially because, short of a litigation, a litigated determination of navigability, the next layer, the state controls navigable waterways. So we looked to the state to say, do you think this is a navigable waterway? And they said yes and explained their rationale, and we agreed with that. So we joined in the statement.
It's kind of ironic, the guy on the north end, who I kind of feel a little bad for because that house was built in 76, and it's basically on top of the section line easement, which becomes Jewel Lake's built on that section line. He didn't even know about it, and we didn't know about it until that thing came out. But he hired Ashburn and Mason.
Oh,
you know that?
My people. I
think your people. So it's kind of like
I did know that. Yeah, it makes sense. They have a very strong land practice, which is why I was there originally.
The other irony is a month ago, Governor Dunleavy had the press conference about the navigable waterways and had John Sturgeon there. And, I said, what about Campbell Lake? I'm just curious because there's been no work. There's been no trails or improvements. It still feels like private property. And we still keep getting contacted by people like, how do we access it? But I asked about that navigable waterway specifically, and there wasn't much of it's navigable. Have a good time.
Yeah, that's an interesting, again, like purely academically, Campbell Lake is a very interesting, land use problem, right? Because it's a couple different pieces, right? It's the question of the section line easement and, does it still exist on both sides of the lake and et cetera? And then there's the separate platted easement, which has its own history. And then there's the question of navigability of the waterway itself. And then again, I think, who knows if it will end up being adjudicated, but if it actually is, it will be an interesting case because of the part of that question of like, is the navigable waterway the current bed of the navigable waterway or the previous bed before it was subject to any human intervention, right?
So if they did something, would they do state or federal court, or would it be up to them?
I believe they would do state court, but folks always could potentially. I don't think there's a federal hook that would merit going to federal court.
One of the funny stories after we wrote the first story, we had all these comments and emails, but this guy was like new to Anchorage and he was on a paddle board and he like paddled out there and he got stuck and he couldn't get out, and he described being like berated and yelled at, and he basically had to beg some people to like let him leave.
Yeah.
He's like, I just want to go home and get to my wife, you know.
It's interesting that you have heard from so many people. I always assume people wouldn't. I mean, it's not like, as someone who spends a lot of time taking their family to various lakes around town, right? Like I would select a lake that has good parking and like a playground, you know, as opposed to, you know, just a skinny little access.
I think, yeah, over the years, people have tried to get on there different
Yeah.
ways, and some people would float on, or some people would, you know, through some of the vacant lots maybe, but it was, the big one is the wintertime. People would go on there to ski, or
ski
one guy
or
was
ice
ice
skate.
fishing, and he
Yeah.
was like escorted off the lake by some folks on they also have the snow machine issue over there, which is another issue that's come up, because they snow machine on the lake, and some people have said, well, why can they do that? And it's, that might be something that comes up, but it's still ongoing.
It is, yeah.
No
It's
longer
an
for you though.
interesting
You're
one.
not.
That's true. I've stepped.
You guys have any
away from
towers
that
over
dilemma.
there?
Not that I know of.
So going back to the new municipal attorney,
Yeah.
I guess, what do you think? I was commented earlier that you came in the middle of it, but for a new administration, I mean, they're starting from essentially scratch.
Mm-hmm.
What am I trying to say? I guess, how would you how do you think that's going to go for the next, several months?
Well, I think it's my impression is that it is sort of the same thing every time there's a new administration, right? That everyone has to learn there are a lot of limitations on what the municipality does and can do that I think a lot of people aren't aware of when they come into working at the community, right? In terms of thinking about, like, the municipality is a tax cap jurisdiction, right? So there's limitations to, can't just wildly increase taxes because there's something new you want to pay for. The flip side of that is that municipal spending is pretty lean, right? I mean, you can't generally make significant space in the budget without cutting core services like safety that are very near and dear to voters on all sides, all parts of the spectrum.
Isn't a huge part of the budget
Police,
80%, like people?
Police, I mean, it's police, fire, and snow removal really is the vast majority of the budget that's not school district, right? You take the whole school district budget out and you look at just what's the non-school district budget, and it's like police, fire, and snow removal, and then everything else kind of hanging around the edges, right? So I think that there's a learning curve that every administration goes through of figuring out the limitations of what they can and can't do, and then also getting up to speed on that those are kind of the practical and monetary limitations, also legal limitations on what you can and can't do.
So your learning curve was Bill was still there. He was manager.
He
at that
was,
point.
yeah, he was still there.
So for Patrick, it's Bill was there and all kinds of people had been there for a while. Now Patrick, it's like a new manager. We're not sure who that is yet. A new mayor, a new all kinds of people. That's probably going to be a lot more difficult to get going.
Yeah, but again, not unprecedented, right? I mean, that's what Bill had when he started, I guess Dennis was the municipal attorney under Sullivan, and he I think probably has the most municipal law experience of anybody in that role in recent memory. He had been a deputy municipal attorney and a long history with municipal law before that. But
so the last time we saw this kind of thing was 2015 when Berkowitz took over for after Sullivan.
Yeah,
and before that, the last time would have been. Sullivan was 2 terms, so that would have been 9.
Yep.
So it's funny how we had Berkowitz, and then before that Sullivan, and then before that Begich, and then before that I think it was Wirch. And you can kind of go back and forth with we
kind of sway back and forth.
You got Democrat, you had Knowles, and you had Weinstrom, and then you kind of it goes back and forth. So
yeah.
So even the COVID I think affected the race a lot, but I think it was already naturally swinging to the other side.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, we're kind of like the federal government that way a bit. Yeah.
So that's interesting. You said the municipal attorney does stuff for the mayor and the assembly?
They do, yeah.
Because in the legislature, they have their own lawyers, and then the governor has his own lawyers.
They do, and it leads to endless conversations at the municipality about privilege, right? Like, who owns the privilege? Can the municipal... can the assembly claim privilege as with the municipal attorney and, over items that can't be shared with the mayor and vice versa? And it's
that's
complex.
interesting. I wonder if stuff ever gets out that somebody's mad about it got out.
Yeah, I mean, it is just complex, right? I mean, we actually have gotten opinions from various different ethics council, the bar, and it's a complicated and sticky question. It's not simple because the state, you're right, it's much more clear. There's a legislative council, they deal with the legislature.
So other like Palmer or Wasilla, they have the weak mayor, so they have like a manager that has more power. So I guess they have an attorney as well, but it's different where Anchorage has a separate mayor, separate assembly.
And Anchorage is also different. And Anchorage is different in the municipal attorney sense in that the municipal attorney is a political appointee who generally turns over with the mayor, right? And that's different than most other municipal attorneys in the state. To the extent there are in-house municipal attorneys, are career appointments, right? Like they will stay, at mayoral administration after mayoral administration. So that's a difference in Anchorage.
So the assembly has their own attorney.
Yep.
But then they have the municipal attorney as well. So can an assembly member come to you and say, "Hey, I want an opinion on this"? Or
yeah, when I was municipal attorney and the other municipal attorneys, the assembly can and does come directly to the municipal attorney's office and can make use of the resources of the civil division as well, because the assembly council can't deal with all of the different needs of the assembly as they work through things.
So interesting. It's so different then, because like in the legislature, they have their own legislative legal, they have their own lawyers, and then the governor has Department of Law, and oftentimes they're at odds with each other on issues. That's interesting. I didn't know that they could use you as well.
Yeah.
So what if the municipal attorney is at odds with the assembly attorney?
Well,
could that happen?
That could happen, right? I mean, in terms of like if we had a different legal opinion.
Yes.
I mean, that can happen as between any lawyers, right? I mean, you go to 4 different lawyers, you might get 4 different opinions on something. So
right, but if it's like within the government, that's more interesting.
And I mean, generally speaking, I'd say if there is division between the mayor and the assembly on a legal issue, the municipal attorney will default to being the mayor's counsel, and the assembly counsel will default to representing the assembly. There's certain requirements, like if the assembly is sued, so in litigation, the municipal attorney represents the assembly in litigation, so it automatically goes to the municipal attorney's office, whereas the assembly counsel is there more for sort of ongoing legal advice and legislative drafting.
So the assembly attorney is kind of hired by the assembly,
yes,
and the assembly decides that one, where the municipal attorney's mayor, but they have to be confirmed.
Yep, that's.
How'd your confirmation go? Is that?
It was pretty uneventful. I'm trying to remember. I don't even really remember.
It's interesting on the legislative side, they have like hearings, very public for all these commissioners and AG. It seems like on the municipal side, it's less public.
No, it's publicly noticed. I mean, I think.
Did they have like hearings or?
I guess I think it has changed over the years, I guess I would say. And there's been more of a focus on actually doing some questioning of candidates in recent years. Mine was it was a work session, so it wasn't a standard Tuesday night assembly meeting, but it was a publicly noticed session. I don't think anyone came. No one really cared.
Yeah, no, on the governor's side, those get sometimes pretty,
they do.
Depending who it is and what position, like AG or like a DNR commissioner. Well, how many votes did you get? The unanimous?
Yes, my recollection is I did. Yeah.
I was on the Anchorage Sister Cities Commission for 3 years, and I got the unanimous. I don't brag, but it was funny when they put me on there. It was Berkowitz appointed me 4 years ago, and then Amy Kaufman told me, because I wanted to be on there for a long time, and I go, "Oh my gosh, that's great!" Like because I speak Russian, and Magadan's one of our sister cities, and I go, this is like December of 17 when I got back from Australia, and I go, "Oh my God, I'm gonna let me tweet this out there." She goes, "Hey, just go ahead and wait till you get confirmed."
Did you get to visit any of our sister cities?
I was actually planning to go to Magadan. They had a big monument they were going to do at the Alaska Siberia during World War II. The Lend-Lease stuff with the airplanes, the Alaska Siberia Air Road, basically, and they were going to have a huge monument they were going to erect for Alaska and Siberia for all the help we gave the Russians in World War II, and that was supposed to be in May of 2020.
Oh wow!
So the COVID.
Yeah, that kind of.
I was actually going to go. I actually reached out to Jason Bockenstadt, the mayor's chief of staff.
Yeah.
And I was really hoping, because they invited us, and I was hoping maybe the mayor might. It's a long shot to go to that, but it was a huge. They actually have a monument in Fairbanks. Your husband's from Fairbanks, right?
He is. Yeah.
They have a monument from Fairbanks that was put up, I think, in 2017, and the ambassador was there, the Russian ambassador. the one who was involved in the Trump stuff. What was
Oh,
that?
yeah.
Kislyak?
Yeah.
He was there, and so was Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia.
Mm-hmm.
There was a huge ceremony in Fairbanks
Okay.
in, I think, 2017. So they basically have a similar type monument they built in Magadan.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I wanted to go, and I've been to Darwin though. I lived in Darwin for 3 months when I was in
Okay.
Australia. They're one of his sister cities. Have you been to any?
I have not. That was like a perk I never got to take advantage of.
It seems like, so I was going through some of the old minutes, and back in like the 80s and 90s, there was more money, especially in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to have like junkets where people would go to some of these cities. They'd have trips, or they'd have,
Yeah.
you know, that's not really, like if I would have gone to Magadan, I would have had to pay for it
Yeah.
on my own. But we, you ever go to that little storage closet in the 8th floor of the mayor's conference room?
The one that's like if you come in and you turn to the left, it's like right there on the wall. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, there's like a big conference room, right? And there's a big closet.
Yeah.
And most of it's Sister City stuff.
Oh.
So
yeah.
one day I said, I was chair, and I said, we got to go through this. There's like all this stuff in there. I mean, it's a lot of stuff. There's like pictures and gifts and all these kind of things from Russia and Australia, and, you know, Incheon, North Korea is one of them. What's the one in Japan? Oh my gosh, why am I blanking on the one in Japan? I'll think of it in a second. But we have all
I
these.
don't remember either.
We have 7 now. They added Harbin, China.
Is there anything good in there? Did you guys discover any hidden
So-
treasure?
So yeah, so we're taking all this stuff out, and there's all these cool things and gifts and different things. And the closet's pretty big, so I
Yeah.
walk all the way to the back, and I'm taking everything. We're taking everything out and kind of organizing it. And I find these 4 kind of like paintings that are facing towards the wall, and I look at one, and it's a beautiful painting of the Anchorage downtown kind of the landscape of downtown Anchorage, and they're oil paintings, and there's 4 of them separately, but when you put them together, they paint the whole downtown Anchorage.
Mm-hmm.
And I go like, what the hell are these doing back here? These are amazing. They're very, very pretty. And I looked at the back, and it was painted by Doreen Lorenz. I don't know if you know her. She's like a news type, but she used to be an artist. Anyways, they were the most amazing paintings you could think of. And I was like, what are these doing here, you know? And they'd been there, I think, since Maelstrom.
Oh wow.
So now they're hanging in the conference room.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've seen those.
We got them hung up.
Look at that. You're having an impact on your
So small little
government,
impact.
just changing things for the better.
We also found all of the original charters. I think 5 of the 6 original charters of when the cities got joined up with Anchorage, and they were signed by them. So we got those hung up as well in the conference room. So that's my one impact I've
I
had.
admit I haven't noticed those as much as I'd noticed the painting, the triptych.
There were some pictures. There was like all kinds of stuff back there. It was incredible. Some of it probably worth money. There was really cool not jewelry, but some like kind of, I don't know, figurines and things that we put those in the big case, the big glass case there. So
Oh yeah.
if I had an impact in my life, I guess that's what,
Yeah, you're making the world better.
that's what it is.
That's good.
Well, I'm glad you came on.
Yeah, likewise.
Don't want to do this for a while. So what's the plan for the summer? Any big hiking, or what do you?
Yeah, I mean, we have 3 children. So we have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. So we don't quite do the level of adventures that we used to do, but we have a lot of kind of family adventuring planned, camping trips. And, we have a flat bottom riverboat we take out. So we'll
nice.
go out and do that. And the kids are starting to get better at biking. So it's fun to do some more, like a little bit of single track riding with them and other things like that.
This is the most awkward transition ever, but I totally forgot about the Heidi Drygas reference about breastfeeding.
Yeah, we just gotta talk about breastfeeding before we can wrap up.
We got to do it. So I did a podcast with Heidi Drygas in Juneau a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
and she had done a post when she was still Commissioner of Labor about breastfeeding in the airport in Seattle, and it was this big thing, and a lot of comments. And you had kind of helped her with that, right, for Anchorage.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember. I think this was a separate post. She had posted on Facebook about the lack of, accommodations for breastfeeding in the Denina Center on Facebook. And this is when I was municipal attorney, and I saw the post and was like, oh my God, well, we have to do something about that. And it was actually a concern that was near and dear to my heart, both because, as you said, I have 3 kids, so I've had to breastfeed in a bunch of different places over the course of my life with kids. But I had actually, when I was, especially my second son, I remember doing some work at the municipality, going to these public meetings for an issue that GCI was involved in, and having to stand in the middle of the open area of the municipal bathrooms to pump because that was the only place that had a plug. And I mean,
That's-
this is something I've done. I mean, the worst place that ever happened to me is I was at a work meeting in Homer, and it was at Fat Olives, a restaurant, which I will
Oh,
forever,
I love
will
that
forever
place.
be grateful to their wait staff because the plugs in their bathrooms weren't working. And so I appealed to this female waiter, and she cleared everybody out of the kitchen and let me like stand in the middle of the kitchen to pump, to plug
That's
in
very
my pump.
accommodating.
It was very nice of them. But so as a result of all this, I was very sensitive to, to hearing her concern. And it's clearly, I mean, access to the Denina hosts a huge array of events. And it was flabbergasting that we didn't have a designated space for the people who attend those events or who work in that facility to pump during, their workday or during their whatever
Or
they're
just
doing.
breastfeed too.
Yeah,
Place
or
to
breastfeed. Yeah,
too,
exactly.
right?
And so I raised it with Bill Falsey, and we talked about it, and we actually came up with a series of solutions and ordered those lactation pods for the Denina Center and for the Egan Center. And then we had a lactation space designated in City Hall, a room that was set up with a lock. And
Yeah, I see those pods more and more in
the
the airports.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
I see them. Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
I think men don't maybe think about that as much unless maybe
Yeah.
you have a kid or,
I mean,
Right.
I didn't think about it until I had kids. So,
yeah, so that's the connection. So you listened to that podcast, right, with Heidi.
I did as part of doing my homework
That was
before coming on this podcast.
There's a good Bill Falsey podcast too I did.
Oh, I haven't listened to that one.
That was before the COVID, but after the earthquake. We talked about the earthquake thing.
Oh, yeah.
So you were there during the earthquake, right?
I was there during the earthquake.
Oh, I got to ask you about that. Where were you at Anchorage?
I was driving I was supposed to go to a meeting about the MLMP transaction. And I was actually I was right by the international off ramp from Minnesota. So I was
Oh,
driving.
where that car sank?
Yeah,
like, sank in?
I was trying to get off that off ramp to drop my then 2-year-old off at my in-laws' house. And I was late. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Why are these people not going up the off ramp? Why are they stopped in the middle of the highway? And it was because it'd fallen into the ground.
So had you felt the earthquake like before that?
Oh,
or-
I did, but in the car. I don't know if you talked to other people who've been. If you're in a
Several people, yeah, it wasn't as.
yeah, it wasn't as notable. I spent like the first minute being like, is something wrong with my car? Like, am I getting a flat tire? And then by the time I kind of figured it out, it was over. So it was much less notable, I think, in a vehicle.
I think Bill he had dropped his kid off at school.
Yeah, he was in the parking lot at Denali Montessori, right?
Yeah, and then he was like, oh, this is probably one I got to deal with.
Yeah.
But I was at home. I've told this story before, but I was getting out of bed at like 8. I was naked. I was like, that's what sleep naked. Tell the listeners. And it started going, and I was like, oh shit. And then it stopped, and I said, okay, that's it. And then it really started going, and I was like so freaked out. My refrigerator and my oven had been pushed into the middle of the kitchen.
Oh, wow.
Stuff had fallen over. I actually really thought my house was coming down. I'm on the 2-story condo,
Oh,
so I
wow.
was a little. You feel it more when you're higher.
Yeah.
Bill Walker was in the elevator.
Oh, I heard that.
We did a
Actually heard that.
podcast,
Yeah.
a Zoom one several months ago,
Oh, wow.
and yeah, he said people were like real scared.
I think the people who were on the 7th and 8th floor of City Hall were just terrified. I mean, it seems like it was, and it's amazing to me how differently it seems to have impacted buildings and structures based on how tall they are and where in town they are, right? Because I was in the car and I was like, oh, it was an earthquake. Like, it wasn't that bad. And then I pulled up to the off ramp, which had fallen into the earth. And I was like, well, maybe it was actually worse than I thought. And then I drove to my in-laws and their house in Spenard, which survived, the big 64 quake, was totally like basically untouched. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe it wasn't that bad after all. I should probably get to work. The meeting's probably starting. And then drove downtown and went into City Hall, which was a huge mess. And we learned a lot about which bookshelves should be attached to the wall
Right.
during that experience.
So you didn't at that point know how bad it was, or you kind of maybe you saw the road collapse. So
Yeah, I saw the road collapse, and then I think it gradually it became more apparent to me when I made it downtown, and there were people running around outside of buildings, and the alarm at the museum was going off. I think you could hear alarms kind of buzzing around, and
me and my buddy, we were like, what's going on? Our power went out, and we're like, let's go figure out what happened. We're driving around, and that's when everything started closing. The Fred Meyer, the cars,
yeah.
The grocery stores. And then I was like, man, maybe we should get some waters or some food. And I'll never forget this. We go to I live on Old Seward and Dowling area, and we go to, there's like a little gas station liquor store over there. So we go in there, and this guy's walking out with like 2 30-packs of like Coors Light or whatever, and like a bottle. And I was like, man,
He made the right choice, right? Because didn't the liquor stores close for a while because they had a lot of broken bottles and
I mean,
things?
some did.
So
Like
it was-
Oak and Keg, the car is Oak and Keg on, I think it was Huffman Remember the picture?
Oh, there was everything
There was just
broken on the
wine.
floor. Yeah,
Every
everywhere.
wine bottle was
Yeah.
broken. But I was like looking at the guy. I was like, man, he's like, you're getting ready. He's like, if we're fucking dying, like if this is gonna go down, I'm going down like with my booze. Everybody else was getting like water and food. This guy had 2 30-packs and like a bottle of like Jack Daniels.
That was like the COVID preparation, though, right? Like I remember when things started to get really terrifying with COVID. My husband and I both had like a panic weekend, and we were both like admitted to each other. We were like, "Well, I went out and did some prepping today," and I was like, well, "What'd you get?" And he was like, "I got a flat of Spam, and I got like,
Wow, that's
and
good.
he got like a whole pile of toilet paper." And he was like, "What did you get?" And I was like, "I got a bunch of boxes of wine and several crates of Girl Scout cookies."
very
And
good.
we were
I-
like, which is a disaster, right?
I was in Juneau, and then I came back for the weekend.
Yeah.
This is before things got crazy. It was like mid-March. That's when all the stuff started with the toilet
Yeah.
paper, and that's like the weirdest one of all the things. But I went to Cars, and a lot of stuff was there, but a lot of stuff like toilet paper and
Yeah.
and certain cleaning, cleaning stuff or wipes were gone. But I went and bought a bunch of ramen soup,
Oh,
like
yeah.
a lot, and and I was like, maybe I shouldn't take so much. Like I feel kind of bad. So I bought, and then I went to REI, and I bought a bunch of those. You know when you go hiking, you have those little like
Oh, like
freeze-dried-
the freeze-dried
yeah,
meals?
which are great
Yeah.
when you're hiking. I bought several of those.
I feel like this is just evidencing that we're all really bad at disaster preparation. It's good we have, because I mean, we would not have survived long with wine, cookies, Spam, and toilet paper.
Well, the booze is actually for me. I mean, that's a good. You need that. The municipality, didn't they do that zombie apocalypse thing? Have you? They did this. I'm not sure if it was a municipality or with some group, but they would do this like zombie thing as like a way to kind of tell people like what you need. It was like a training thing. I think it was called the zombie apocalypse.
Oh, what do you need in the face of a zombie apocalypse? Did you learn?
Essentially, they were doing it to like say, here's what you need if something goes like earthquake,
Yeah.
natural disaster, and it was kind of a fun way to do it. They've done it a few times,
Okay.
and I mean, all the water, flashlights. There's all kinds of things you should, and most people just don't have them.
Yeah.
They don't have that stuff.
Yeah, that's
And,
fair.
If we ever had a 64 type thing, you wonder like how many people would. I got some friends. I'm like in the valley. They're kind of preppered up. I'm going to their house.
Yeah, I would say we're kind of midway on the prepper scale, in that my husband's a hunter, so we at least have like a freezer full of meat that we could, I guess, survive on if we needed to. But
And you got that wine and
that's true, wine and Spam.
Girl Scout cookies and
Those are
Spam.
gone now. I mean, it's been a year of this crisis, so
So you got to re-up them. That's what I'm going to do.
That's
After
true.
I leave here, I'm going to go buy some more stuff for the garage.
it's good.
Well, Becky Wynn Pearson, great doing the podcast. Great talking to you.
Yeah, likewise.
So we'll do another one. And if any towers are going up in my neighborhood, you can tell me about it. I don't care.
I'll keep you posted.
I don't care, but
That
I guess
happens.
some people do.
Yeah.
So great talking to you.
Likewise. Thanks,
Okay,
Jeff.
folks, if you have an idea for a podcast or want to do a podcast, get a hold of me and stay tuned for the next one.
Landline, ring.